The first joint I'm looking at is the hinge joint of the knee. I know this is a hinge joint because a hinge joint is a common class of synovial joint that includes the knee joints. Hinge joints are formed between two or more bones, where the bones can only move along one axis to flex or extend. The bones connecting to this joint are the femur, or the thigh bone, which is above the knee joint, the patella, which is the kneecap, the tibia, or the shin bone, which is below the knee joint, and the fibula, which is a thin bone of the lower leg. The femur is the longest and heaviest bone in the body, and the body's weight is supported by the femur when, for example, running, jumping, and standing still. So it plays a big part in a free throw in basketball. The muscles connecting to the hinge joint of the knee are the hamstring and the quadriceps. In the preparation phase of a free throw, the movement starts with a flexion. When you flex your knee, you reduce the angle. In the preparation phase, see how the player bends his knees in readiness to push up towards the goal to shoot the ball. This movement occurs because you are bending your knees, which is flexion, and because your muscles work in pairs, so your hamstring contracts, being the tibia and fibula towards the femur for knee flexion. In other words, movement of the hinge joint of the knee is created by muscles pulling the bones to move the joints. The agonist muscle is the hamstring. It contracts, and therefore it is the muscle doing the work. This muscle is also known as the prime mover. The quadriceps are the antagonists as they are relaxed and the muscle lengthens. The next stage is the execution phase of the free throw. After the knee flexion is the knee extension, which is where you increase the angle of your knee when you move your knees and body up so you can release the ball. In knee extension, the agonist muscle is the quadriceps, and the antagonist muscle is the hamstring. Your quadriceps are located on the top of the tibia, above the knee joint, and when the quadricep muscle contracts, it pulls on the tibia, which makes your knee joint move. In the execution phase of a free throw, see how the player extends his knees as he pushes up towards the goal as he releases the ball. Following the release of the ball, the final phase of a free throw, the follow-through occurs. During this time, all joints continue moving through the end of their full range of motion following the release of the ball. The second joint I'm looking at is the hinge joint of the elbow. I know this is a hinge joint because a hinge joint is a common class of synovial joint that includes the elbow joints. The bones connecting to this joint are the humerus or upper arm bone, the ulna, which is the larger of the two forearm bones, and the radius bone. The humerus is the largest bone in the arm, and many powerful muscles that move the upper arm at the shoulder and the forearm at the elbow are anchored to the humerus. Movement of the humerus is essential to all of the actions of the arm, such as throwing and lifting. The elbow joint allows for the flexion and extension of the forearm relative to the upper arm, as well as rotation of the forearm and wrist. There are a large number of muscles which cross the elbow joint, enabling it to flex and extend. These muscles connecting to this joint are the bicep and the tricep. In the case of the elbows, the joints are hinged and the movement starts with a flexion, preparing for a free throw. When you flex your elbow, you reduce the angle. In the preparation phase, see how the player flexes his arms in readiness to throw the ball towards the goal. This movement occurs because you are bending your elbow, which is flexion, and because your muscles work in pairs, so your bicep contracts, being the agonist muscle, and pulls the bones, which then makes you bend your elbow, which is known as elbow flexion. This movement occurs because you are bending your elbow in flexion, and because your muscles work in pairs, so your bicep contracts, which pulls the joints, which makes them bend your elbow. The agonist muscle or prime mover muscle is the bicep. The antagonist muscle is the tricep, as it relaxes and lengthens. The next phase is the execution phase of the free throw. After elbow flexion is elbow extension, where you straighten your elbow. Extension occurs when you are applying force to the ball on the release of the ball to shoot it up towards the goal. The tricep becomes the agonist and the bicep is the antagonist. Your tricep contracts and pulls on the bone, which makes the elbow joint move. Like the hamstring and the quadriceps in a knee joint, the triceps and the biceps work in pairs and take turns of doing the work, depending on whether the joint is in a flexion or extension. In the execution phase of the free throw, see how the player extends his elbow as he shoots, which plays a major role in the shooting. Following the release of the ball, which is the final phase of a free throw, the follow-through occurs. After the ball has left the hand, the elbow should reach full extension, and all other joints should reach the full range of their motion also. Anatomical structure can limit the performance or affect the performance of a free throw. For example, if you are short, you are close to the ground. This means that the height of release of the ball will be lower than that of a taller person. A short person will have shorter limbs, so the degree of flexion at the knees will need to be greater than in the preparation stage to create more power. Also, the degree of flexion at the elbow of a shorter or smaller person would need to be greater to create more power or thrust to ensure a greater angle of release and to make sure the ball reaches the goal. A second example is how big your muscles are. If you are a strong person, you will have more power in your leg and elbow flexion and extension. Therefore, depending on a player's height and size, different amounts of pressure and power will need to be applied to flexion and extension of the joints to ensure a successful free throw.